Hello, everyone. This is Katrina Menzigian with Everest Group. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm joined here with my colleagues, Shirley Hung and Amy Fong, both of whom are partners with the firm. And I'd like to ask each of them to quickly introduce themselves. Amy?
Hi, thanks, Katrina. Great to be here. I lead our sourcing and vendor management service line, as well as a lot of adjacent kind of functional services that we offer to large companies of all sizes across all industries. So I work with a variety of roles from companies that buy tech and services across the organization.
Thank you. And Shirley?
Really thrilled to be part of this discussion. It's rare that we get an all-women panel, but I am a partner as well with Everest Group. I've been here for about 7.5 years. I work, my teams cover horizontal areas within organizations, so finance and accounting, procurement, supply chain, as well as enterprise-wide platforms such as SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, Microsoft Business Apps, and so forth. So thank you for inviting me to take part.
Sure. And I didn't introduce my role per se. So I lead our analyst relations engagement practice here at Everest Group. So I work with all of our research teams like Amy and Shirley, as well as our client directors and so forth, to make sure that Everest Group's relationship and working dynamic is strong and healthy and value driven with the analyst and advisor relations communities. And I am happy to have this conversation today because one of the questions I'm often talking about with that audience, my stakeholder audience, is that, how is Everest Group working with the buyers at large enterprises, mid-sized companies, who are out there making decisions on technology investments as well as services investments. And so I wanted this conversation today to focus a little bit on helping people understand how to think about Everest Group and the work we do with essentially our mutual clients. But before we go ahead and as we're having people join the conversation, I wanted to ask, this morning I woke up here in Boston to snow on April 7th, and I thought we were past that. And suddenly I thought, what are people's favorite seasons? A little different than asking you where you're from. And I wanted to know why, what your favorite season is and why. And for me, it's definitely the beginning of spring and the beginning of fall. I know that's two, but here in Massachusetts, those are the glorious seasons when things are wonderful and they're so short. We have very short fall and very short spring. So we look forward to those with bated breath. So if you have a favorite season and you'd care to share it with us, please go ahead and throw it in the comments section. So thank you everyone for joining. I wanted to begin by helping you orient to how to think about Everest Group. That is something that I find folks are often, they're familiar with our brand and they have a certain perception of the kinds of work we do, but I thought this is a good opportunity to create a broader understanding. So this is a really quick at a glance set of information. And a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. Right in the middle of the slide is our current number of analysts. People think that we're a boutique firm, and I would argue 400 plus analysts really kind of isn't boutique any longer. We cover a wide range of capabilities among those analysts. And then, of course, we have our in-house sort of operational organizational staff that makes this total number of headcounts significantly larger. And so, the other thing that's interesting about this number is our model is such that we have on average about 9 to 10 analysts per client director or per market-facing sales professional. And because that, and I bring that up because it emphasizes the fact that we are very much a research and analyst engagement driven organization. And we believe that that is where people get their value from their engagement with us. Another thing that probably is sort of a good to know for many folks is this number over here of 5,000 plus tech innovations. And what that's referring to is not only standalone software technology that's productized and sold to the market. We cover quite a bit of that, both from vertical standpoint as well as more, cross-industry technology, but Also, when we look at all the different kinds of services models out there that we work with clients on, technology is very much part of those as well. And so the deployment of AI and the deployment of, technology for software platforms and cloud environments and things like that, all of that is captured in the coverage that we have in our view and our knowledge about the technology in the marketplace. And so thought that might be helpful for helping you kind of get a perspective on how to think about Everest Group. We also serve a wide range of client categories. We have a very strong base of, what some people call enterprises, buyers, clients, what have you. But these are the consumers of the technology and services that we're all working towards engaging in the marketplace. We have a portfolio of technology providers. Now, this slide only shows our technology provider clients, but we also have a very large and deep base of service provider clients, but this aligns with our conversation today, so drawing attention there. And then the other piece that's also important is that we work quite a bit with what we generally group together as influencers. And what we mean by this are, you can see folks from the investment community here. You can see folks from industry associations as well as country associations, for example. Those that are interested for different reasons in the growth direction and dynamics of different kinds of services and technology markets. So we work closely with them as well based on client need. And I thought, sometimes folks are like, I didn't know you do this because I saw you working with my client. And so capturing sort of a way to think about what are the different ways Everest Group, this is a sort of introductory high level of, something we'll go into some of this in more in depth as Shirley and Amy bring up their examples, but I'll ask them to illustrate that. But, how do we engage with buyers? Well, many of them are our membership clients. So when they're an ongoing membership client, they have an ongoing stream of access and research from us, from our published research, from other tools and services that we offer around pricing and our price book. And of course, many of them are using their inquiry to talk to our analysts. I was just talking to one of our practice partners yesterday who was talking about a large financial institution, and they've done in the last year over a dozen inquiries with them related to technology questions that they want to calibrate with our analysts and run them by for thoughts and input. So the inquiry is important for our members. We also have, in a more sort of strategic nature, ongoing conversations with the senior executives at buyer organizations around more strategic issues having to do with governance, location strategies, different kinds of delivery and sourcing models. And, they're looking for our advice on transformation roadmaps or technology developments. And those happen with that one-on-one executive to executive kind of, hey, I need your thoughts on, something. And then, of course, all of this comes together when we do our live events that are large format events. One brand is Engage, the other is Elevate. But this is where we gather a few hundred executives along with our analyst teams in one location for 2 to 3 days to really go deep and really sort of take learnings out of that experience. So that's another way that we have sort of a sustained engagement with different kinds of buyers. So what I wanted to do now is sort of use this as a foundation to ask sort of Amy and Shirley to help our audience better understand who are the kinds of executives you're working with and what kind of stakeholders are you working with on a regular basis in that nature of sort of ongoing, sustained dialogue and relationship. If you were to think about the stakeholders or the roles they play inside their organizations, what would those be?
Want me to go first or Shirley? I will go first.
Jump in, Amy.
All right. So Katrina, that was a great overview, and I will call out just a little bit different in my role that you mentioned 400 analysts. I think about 350 of those analysts are market facing, so they're covering various tech and services markets. That's where Shirley's team is as well, and she mentioned a few of that. And then we have our teams that are more function facing, and we're focused on functions on the buy side, right? So my role specifically and my team specifically, the primary function they're supporting is sourcing, so procurement, strategic sourcing, category managers, the CPO organization, and vendor management, so VMOs, that might sit in IT, or they might sit in a different function like customer experience. Your customer service group might have a vendor management organization, but depending on where they are throughout the organization, we still support them. And I also get involved. I work on some of the adjacent roles like IT leaders as well that might also have the same kind of sourcing and vendor management needs. We work with GBS organizations or global capability centers, global business services that might be buying services as well. So there's a lot of overlap because every company is a little bit different in their org structure. But essentially, I think of my role as helping people make better decisions in selecting, buying from, and managing their tech and service providers.
Yeah, and on my end, we engage with a lot of the functional leaders that, you know, for example, for finance, it would be the CFO and their direct reports. Finance is a really big component of shared services models, so GBS leaders and the tower leads. We work with procurement as well. So we actually work quite closely with Amy and her team when we cover procurement from a services and technology standpoint. And we also work with supply chain leaders too. So primarily those decision makers or those people who are accountable for business outcomes in relation to these functions, you know, we representing the firm a bit more broadly. It's not just those three functions, but we also engage with IT leaders. We engage with HR leaders as well. So what's really nice, Katrina, in one of the slides that you showed is that as a research analyst, everybody is interesting to us. So I work with a lot of providers, tech and service providers, but I also work with their clients or prospective clients. And we talk with consulting firms that also, and investment firms that are very interested in all of this spaces. So as a person who likes to talk, it's really great to have an opportunity to talk to so many different people.
Certainly. You brought up something that I think is maybe a little different about our model compared to some other research firms of our size. You, for example, you and your team and others that are your peers are looking at both the provider side, the vendor side, as well as the buyer side, right? You just mentioned that. And the research teams you lead collectively are looking at both sides of the equation. So in that case, you know, what I see as being really interesting is that when somebody talks to one of our analysts, the analyst is able to provide both sides of the story because they're talking to both sets of parties in all of these decision-making processes, right? So we don't segment our research teams, the people that do the research and the published stuff and the people that do the client-facing work. That's all integrated in the same knowledge as a project team. So what, in your experience, how does that affect the way you're able to conduct conversations? Or Amy, when you're working with your clients or with our colleagues, because you know you two actually collaborate quite a bit on client projects, right? You know, how does that knowledge of being able to look at the coin from both sides affect the kinds of conversations you're able to have with whichever client you're talking to, whether it's buyer or seller?
Yeah, I do think it's a competitive advantage of ours to be able to have that holistic view. And, you know, all the time when I'm talking to functional leaders, they'll say, you know, they'll ask questions about what providers are doing, how they're investing, how they should be thinking about partnering with them. And the engagements that we have on the provider side certainly help inform our ability to provide advice to the functional leaders. On the other hand, providers would like to know how to serve their clients better, right? What are their clients' priorities? What are the things that are top of mind for them so that they can invest accordingly? And so that's it really helps in our conversations. Now, that being said, I do want to be open and honest that there's sometimes conflicts of interest that would arise. And, I come from the buyer side. I was actually at Rio Tinto. I was a client of Everest Group. And when I was exploring this opportunity to join Everest Group, that was topmost question for me. And every single conversation and interview that I had with the partners at Everest Group, I asked, how do you manage that potential conflict of interest? And it was it was a very interesting set of responses that I got. Obviously there's frameworks, there's processes in place to ensure that we're not advising on both sides of the same deal and those sort of things. That's a given. But I really still remember our managing partner, Eric Simonson, who said, at the end of the day, it comes down to the corporate culture and the sense of integrity that you have to be able to do your job well and to serve your clients in with integrity and ethically. And no matter how well you build those frameworks and processes to construct those Chinese walls, if you don't have that culture of integrity, you're not going to be able to maintain a conflict-free environment. And certainly in the 7.5 years that I've been here, I've encountered that time and time again, where there are choices. When you reach a junction, you can take the easy route and pursue some revenue, or you can take the harder route, which is to do what's right. And there has never been any pressure to do anything but to do what's right. Whenever anybody mentions this is the right thing to do, that is the route that we take. And I find that as a former buyer or a functional leader, that I find that very reassuring.
Yeah. Amy, any thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll agree on the ethics and the conflict of interest point that Shirley made. Her and I both onboard a lot of our new hires, and this is one of the things we talk about in our cultural values. And it's something we run up against a lot and we deal with at the very top level of making sure that we're never on two sides of a deal, the same deal. That's important. I think that's differentiator. But going more to your first question, which was the benefits of knowing the buyer and the seller side. I do partner with Shirley, our team's partner on Procure Tech, because my background is 25 years or 20 some years in the procurement function. I know the tech side and the process side very well, so I help both buyers and then I work with the providers as well. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Most of my peers and other analyst firms are not doing both. They don't have the deep best practices experience as well as the ability to talk to tech providers about what their clients really need. And I train my team on that as well. And it's really important, I think, to understand both why is the tech here and what problem is it solving, and what other problems need to be solved besides just tech. Especially right now when we're in a place where organizations need to change rapidly. There's a huge amount of change management that needs to happen. Tech is not the only solve for that. They need to adapt. The people are actually the hardest part. I think we know that now. So that's a huge advantage I think we have, the way that we bring people in.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good segue into the other topic I wanted to bring up, but before I go back to the slides, forgot to mention, I should have mentioned it at the beginning of the conversation, but we, for those of you who are participating today, who are analyst relations professionals, we actually have a special thank you for joining us. You can actually get an offer for a significantly discounted ticket to one of our upcoming live large format events. It's called Everest Group Elevate. It'll be in September in Dallas. And so it's a deeply discounted ticket option for
First
you
week of
as an AI
October.
professional.
Sorry.
What's that, Shirley?
First week of October.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we'd moved it out. I thought, yeah, we'd moved it out
First
a
week
week.
of
So it's the
October.
first week of October. Yeah, thank you for that correction. So, you know, you will, there's a link that you can connect, you can use. Where's that link? Oh, I think it's in the LinkedIn Live page for this event. You will be able to access the link and be qualified for a discounted ticket up until May 30th. So you have a month and a half or more, almost 2 months to take advantage of that. So wanted to point that out. But if we could bring up the slides. Thank you, Shilpa. So, Amy, you started talking about all the different things that go into helping clients, right? And so, you know, in the beginning, I made some comments about sort of our ongoing work with clients, this, you know, people that need to manage technology decisions and choices on an ongoing basis, which is part of how all organizations work. But there are times where you have a buying event or a buying decision that might happen, or you have a contract that's come up for renewal, or you need to invest in something new. So a lot of that overlaps, of course, the IP, the thought process overlaps, but sometimes there's different questions involved, right? So if you're making a new decision, a new investment, you may have other objectives associated with that technology decision. You may have a different problem to solve. And that's what's driving you to make a technology or services investment. So what we've got up here is a sort of the life cycle of some of these kinds of decisions and what goes into them before, during, and after a particular decision is made, and where Everest Group supports and how we support versus how the client manages the process. One thing I want to point out is that we, as Everest Group, to Amy's point, are never engaged with both sides of the dynamic around the buying decision. And so, Amy, you started talking about this. Maybe you can pick it up there and talk us through some of the points that are important here for people to understand sort of what we do, but you know, maybe just as importantly, what we don't do in a certain client buying scenario.
Sure. Yeah, happy to jump in. And I'll preface this by saying that we work with, getting a little feedback. We work with our clients primarily in a membership model, and that does influence a bit how we engage with them and where we're helping them. We also do quite a bit of projects, but on my part of the organization, membership is really primary. And although this appears like a linear process, it's really not. The first part of having a category strategy and the last part of ongoing vendor management, those are ongoing continuous processes that every company is doing, even if they don't call it category strategy or category management, they're doing it somehow, right? They're deciding who they're going to work with, who their preferred vendors are. They're looking at what's happening in the technology space, what's happening in the world around us that are in our business needs, our client, our internal budget holder needs that might change in the future. So right now there's a huge push of, you know, AI is obviously AI is coming into play in a lot of different ways, but how do we need to look at the services or the tech providers we're using, and how is that going to change in the next year? Do we want to bring in specialists, for example, to help us with a certain activity, right, or in a certain function? So with our members, we have research, they have access to our analysts. We are always supporting them on building those category strategies. Our peak matrices, which most of the providers, the AR people, are probably very familiar with the peak matrix. That's just one of many, many research types we have. We have others where we're like, on the working on tech buyers guides. If you need to buy Data management, where should you be thinking, right? What should you be looking at? What are some of the considerations? And then you get into a peak where you're like, who are the vendors, right? So that actually saves a lot of time to our clients up front in not having to do an RFI, not having to go do a ton of extra research. Our analysts help them through that and figure out that kind of short list. Then there's a bunch of steps in between where you're actually selecting your vendor and you're actually negotiating the pricing. And sometimes those are the same thing. Often in services, they're more closely aligned. Often in tech, you kind of decide who you're going to work with, and then you got to figure out the commercials of it, and they're different groups that are coming into play. I think to your point, Katrina, what's important there is that we do quite a bit of software price benchmarking. We do quite a bit of services agreement, services relationship price benchmarking. Never on the same side of the same deal, of course. That is not the case for all of our competitors. Not going to name names, but always ask that if you're a buyer. And then we also don't feed deals to the sell side, right? We're not a selling channel for any of the providers. So our role of being unbiased across this whole cycle is very, very important to us, and that comes down to that ethical backbone. I know that there are providers that would love to talk to me and talk about how to sell better to how to sell to their providers. I will help them understand the needs of a buyer. And I think a big role we play is helping our buyers, our clients be better buyers. They're better consumers. You want to sell as a service or tech provider, you want to sell to people who understand what they're buying, because you're going to have better outcomes. And I view our role as really an educator on both sides versus a channel for one or the other.
Thank you. So
if Shirley has anything.
Yeah, Shirley, I was going to say, one of the things that's also, tied into our earlier comment is that whether it's on the membership side or on a more bespoke case, the subject matter experts needed to work on a particular buying process are the same analysts, right? So how do you and your team navigate that, Shirley, in terms of making sure that there is no conflict of interest, for example, as you've been talking about, making sure that you get pulled into the right team for the right subject. So if somebody's doing a deal that involves a finance application or a finance and accounting outsourcing engagement, we have these matrix teams that bring functional people, pricing people, technology people, all of them together, based on what the client needs. What's been your experience with how you manage all of that?
That's a really great question. We talked about integrity as being one of the cultural pillars. Another really key pillar for us is also being collaborative in our approach. We have over 400 analysts. All the analysts are very specialized in what they do, and we are very clear about pulling in the right SME for the right topic. That's a really big part of what Amy's team does, is they herd the cats. And sometimes we show up on a client call with a team of 10, and it's not because we want to it's really because we have we want to make sure that the experts are the people that are the experts are the ones that are there and helping progress the conversations, right, and providing the most valuable advice. And it's also embedded in our incentives. It's embedded in the way we manage our talent. It's a really critical component to people's career journeys within Everest Group, is their ability to collaborate with each other. And that is also how we surface any potential conflicts of interest as well. And we work through and try to resolve for that before it gets to a point where we have to manage any kind of issues that arose or does arise. So I'm not sure if that directly answers the question, Katrina, that you were trying to get at. Sometimes by being so collaborative in nature, it serves as its own set of frustrations. But frankly, I think it's the right thing to do, right? It's the right thing for our clients. It's the right thing for our teams. We can't all be knowledgeable about everything. And the beauty of having such a strong group of analysts is that there's always somebody who knows something that you don't know, and everybody's willing to help. I know that in speaking with perhaps some of the other analyst firms, that culture is not as prevalent as it is here at Everest Group.
Oh, I did come from another research firm, and what I found super refreshing was that how we internal. So this is a little bit of inside baseball for our listeners, but how we manage just the way we compensate our analysts, compensate our teams, keep track of revenue, things like that, is designed to help make it easy to collaborate, right?
Mhm.
It's not meant it's meant to deter a sense of territoriality, or my budget versus your budget, my P&L versus your P&L, like you're not robbing Paul to pay Peter kind of thing. It's about lifting up the whole pie, shall we say. So I'm gonna pivot a little bit. We've talked a lot about how we've described how we work with clients right now quite a bit up until this point in the conversation. And I had sort of asked each of you to think about maybe a client example where you can walk us through maybe what you've done in an actual scenario. No names, of course, but in an actual scenario of, we had a client with this kind of like a particular problem, and how you went about tackling it, and what was the nature of the problem and the nature of the people that you were working with. Amy, can I tap you to go, or Shirley, if you want to go first? Whichever.
I'll jump in first.
Go ahead.
Just for a change. I have two examples that I could reference, and they're somewhat different. The first example is there's this large company that had previously outsourced, had a bad experience in outsourcing, so they brought all the work back in-house for many years, and now they were thinking about outsourcing again. And they engaged with us first to do a small project looking at different operating models, particularly in relation to shared services and GBS. And we approached it from the standpoint of, what are some of the prevailing models that are out there, knowing what we knew about their organization, what could potentially work if they were to set up a hybrid type of model where they have in-house services teams in tandem with third-party services teams. How would you be organized for that? Are there some additional capabilities that, particularly in relation to vendor management, perhaps, or service management even, that you would need to put in place? And through that small project, they made a decision that they did want to go ahead and engage in a third-party hybrid type of model. So they were the ones that actually decided who to reach out to. They leveraged our research, our peak matrix assessments. They asked for some opinions from us on who they should engage with, but ultimately they got some proposals back from two parties, and that's when they engaged with us again to do some benchmarking on the engagement models to check, because a lot of these kind of contracts, they're and proposals, it's very hard actually to get to a true apples to apples type of comparison. And that's where our commercial solutions and analytics teams are so great at what they do. And they were able to look at the two contracts, look at the terms and conditions, the SLAs, look at the pricing, look at the transformation roadmap, advise on some areas in which they can, our client would be able to negotiate with the providers. And then they ended up down selecting one to kind of move forward with. And again, they leaned on us even after one provider was picked to help support in the transition planning exercise. So what are some of the key things that they need to think about? And we actually participated in workshops where both the downlisted provider and the client teams were in place just to provide a third-party point of view. So this is an example in which, the client owned the entire process. They leveraged our IP to make certain decisions, and also analyst support to ensure that they're not going to fall into the same type of pitfalls that made their first round of outsourcing so painful for them. So I thought that was a really great showcase of the different kinds of work that we did. And in that case, that client was not an existing member. We had some connection with some of the key decision makers, but their need was project based. Right.
Yeah.
And every organization has their own kind of different set of needs. So.
Yeah. So what I think is worth highlighting in that scenario you described, Shirley, is that this was not a membership client, so they came to us specifically for a particular scope of work. Sounds like we had existing relationships with leaders who had experienced us somewhere, somehow previously and understood what we were about. It looks like we had a case where they have a knowledgeable and empowered in-house, operations management team who knows how to run maybe a selection process, but wanted outside support, outside perspective, a thought partner, maybe somebody who's a champion to help with internal change on the decision-making teams. And so we followed their clue. We followed what they needed done to the degree of what they wanted. We weren't running the process, but we were responding to their needs in the process. Am I summarizing it correctly?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And our role was quite clear to both sides of the both for the provider or the partner that was in question and the organization themselves. And but yeah, it was a really interesting project that I worked on. There was a second example, but I'm not going to go into that until Amy gets a chance to go first.
Oh, my turn. Shirley and I collaborate. We joke that my team, what's mine is hers and what's hers is mine
Yeah.
on our teams in the best possible way. Like we both have great teams that work well together. But so we're used to kind of bouncing back and forth like this. So I'll take it a little bit more from a membership perspective, since a lot of my clients are members. And some of the key things we work with them on, especially from the IT perspective, I'm thinking of one client that started with us, large retail client, that we probably a fan favorite of most people, that we started working with several years ago. And at the time, we were really focused on IT sourcing, IT services with their IT sourcing vendor management team that sat in the IT organization. They knew that they had different processes, different ways of managing, different rate cards with every single IT service and tech provider that they worked with. There was no homogeneity there, no standards. So one of the first things we did was, focused on the services part, because tech services is so important. And this is where I think we have a benefit of kind of helping IT organizations, in that we cover both the services, the cloud, the software. We can cover it from a lot of different areas, where a lot of our competitors are more focused on software and cloud. We are deep in tech services as well, and that's a huge percent of what drives your tech spend. So we started by what seems very simple, but just standardizing the role definitions of the IT roles, the external IT workforce, meaning that they had the same, when they went to talk to described a coder, a senior coder for Cognizant versus Infosys versus Accenture, it was all the same thing, right? Instead of all of them having different definitions. That's kind of a 101 thing, but it was actually impactful to this client by millions and millions of dollars to their CIO, just getting that harmonized. Over time, they worked with us on pricing, access, and data, and validating, where they were on specific, with specific providers, how competitive they were. What that's evolved to over time is much more sophisticated consideration of how do we bring AI, how do we transform our relationships with the providers in a time of AI. And that might be, where do we partner with a tech provider versus a service provider, right? Where do we want to build versus buy? Where do we want to, change the partnering, where we're co-investing in AI with the service provider? And right now we're in a number of different clients, looking at much more in sophisticated ways of looking at, do we price this for autonomous pods where we have agents plus people doing the work? And there's lots of internet fodder on LinkedIn about how services are all going to go away and how SaaS is going to go away. I think most of us that have been in the business for a while know that, change is slow, and you still need people in there making a lot of decisions. And not everybody should be rolling their own on all tech. I feel strongly about that last one. But part of that means that you need to reevaluate how you're looking at tech and services as this in the same shopping cart, right? So we're working through that with a lot of clients. This is one of them. And in some cases, our pricing team might be going in on individual areas and saying, look, this contract is up. Your next 5-year contract is going to be a combination of agents and people, and this is how we're going to price that. And a hybrid of outcome-based and the traditional pricing. So that gets to upfront, kind of looking at who are the providers, and then that more of the tactical, like how do we actually get to that point? What does the structure of commercials need to look like? That same client also, we've looked at how they manage vendors. They don't have a centralized vendor management organization. And your VMO is really the team that on an operational basis keeps holds your biggest suppliers, your biggest partners to the standard and aligns your strategy and all of that. So figuring out how to execute on that, helping their teams build those capabilities, that's all been part of that relationship as well. That doesn't even really touch the commercial side. It's more about your practices internally. So the way we could work with an individual client that's a member over several years could be, we help with market intelligence, we help with commercial actual price benchmarking, and we help with functional best practices on how do we become better as an organization.
Yeah. So thank you. I love the way we were able to show the different ways that we're involved with clients. And I think the last topic that we really need to kind of touch base on, and you've both mentioned this issue of price benchmarking. We do have a pretty robust commercial and solutions analytics team that is a resource, is a capability. Sometimes they engage clients wholly with their own resources and capabilities. Sometimes they're partnering with research teams and project leads like yourselves. If we could get the slides back up, I wanted to show one more slide. So, wanted to give you an idea of some of the clients that we've worked with over the past several years around different kinds of pricing topics. Some of it is price benchmarking. Some of it is around Amy just highlighted, we're in an environment where the pricing structures are going to evolve quite a bit between the services component and the AI component and the agent component and the human component. All of that is in motion. And I know that here at Everest Group, we get a lot of questions from those delivering technology and services to our leadership of, what is this change going to be like? What am I supposed to be planning for? How do I hire? How do I staff as a provider? So that these same questions are prevalent for the companies that you see here on your screen. And so, this is an example of how we've helped with technology pricing. We do quite a bit of work on services pricing as well, just so you know. But, in the spirit of our conversation, we're looking at some of our technology specific scenarios. And so, based on this, I wanted to ask Shirley and Amy to comment on what are the most prevalent issues people are having. Do you have a sense of, are they worried about locking themselves into pricing and not being able to adjust and react quickly to changes as they unfold? Are they more concerned about, does it make more sense to go to a service company and have them eat the cost of the technology, and then they commit to a price to me that they have to, deliver on somehow? Am I better off? Is technology going to become so inexpensive that I'm better off managing it myself?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're seeing traces of that in your conversations, but I thought I'd throw that out.
I can take a first stab at this one. So yes to all of the above, and I'll speak specifically to software right now, because although we do a lot with services, software is kind of the question in this slide. So software costs for most organizations, almost all large companies have seen software costs increase quite a bit in the last year or two, and they're expected to increase more. There's two reasons. One is demand. They're adding new applications, right? There's also a lot happening on the pricing models of their software suppliers, whether it's their costs are going up or they're just changing the models to capture more revenue, right? We all want more revenue, so I understand that. That is a huge point of stress for most CPOs, CFOs. There's a few things that, that are sort of the way that you address that. One is just going in and understanding what you're buying and what you need and what you don't need. The other is more of a demand management. So, we have, I joke about project management tools. I was talking to a very large tech social media company, and their sourcing person was like, we have 9 different project management tools and we can't get rid of anyone because everybody loves them all. I laughed because we're not a huge firm and we have 5, right? And we aren't going to, you couldn't rip like Jira or Rike out of any functions cold dead hands, right? So that's just the reality, that you're not getting the scale that you could in a lot of other spend categories where you can consolidate. Consolidation is very hard. A lot of companies don't have great processes to determine who buys and what software you buy, and vet whether you already have something. So we work with them on that as well. We've done some big projects where the CIO was like, take out, 7 million of spend, and we were like, okay, you're not going to negotiate your way out of that. You're going to have to change the way you make decisions, right? I think those are all important levers there. On the flip side, though, there's a lot of uncertainty. The SaaS apocalypse. How will SaaS be priced in the future? There's a lot of theories on that. I don't think anyone actually knows the future right now, right? If we did, go play your cards on Polymarket or whatever, but everybody's hypothesizing based on very educated insights, and we have really smart people that are hypothesizing on that. In the last 24 hours or 48 hours, I looked at a thread between our CEO or our founder and our CEO and a CEO of another firm that debated this back and forth. We just had a call this morning with all of our partners in our leadership team where we were talking about, what does this mean for software providers? What is the future of their pricing? And of course, some of us were like, well, what does that mean for buyers? How do we prepare them, right? So these are active discussions where we have, I'm going to go back to that sort of where we have both sides. We have really smart people that are discussing these and deciding, evolving our own thinking on how do we bring this to our clients, whether they're tech providers, or whether they're tech buyers, how do we help them prepare for the future? And it's a future that's uncertain no matter how you slice it, right? But how can you be in the best possible position? And I think that's also where you get the benefit of varied thought leaders, but a relatively small firm where we can still get on have a conversation like that with it's a bit, we debate and provocative, statements and things like that. So I think ultimately what comes out of that is that you have more evolved thinking than the average LinkedIn poster that you might be, the average blogger or YouTuber that you're watching when you talk to an Everest Group analyst.
And I just kind of want to address that last point. I am very much against clickbait. And I know that for those people who are here listening who work with us at Everest Group, we have provocations that we sometimes send out, and even our provocations are somewhat realistic. We're not looking for kind of rage bait and people who and just kind of to generate noise. I don't think reality, to Amy's point, I don't think that reality works that way. I think it works a lot more slowly than you expect, because people are messy, organizations are messy, change is difficult, and I think when our clients engage with us, they expect that level of reality to surface in the advice that we provide them, and I think that is ultimately what helps all of us move forward and achieve what we ultimately want, which is more maturity in the spaces that we operate in, because more maturity means more business value. And I think that that's ultimately what our objective is when we're working with all the various stakeholders, whether it's a buy side or a sell side, or whether it's an influencer. We're all trying to work towards driving more business value.
So I'm going to start wrapping up. And I think, listen to our conversation. I hope that folks do have a better and clearer understanding of Everest Group and how to think about the role we play with their clients. One thing that I think you can walk away from with this conversation is that, yes, we have a peak matrix and we have other assessments that we put out that provide some interesting snapshots of the market, where they are at that time. But, and we do quite a bit of them. We published over 100 peak matrix in the last year, 12 months. But where we're also creating a lot of impact, as you both described, are in some of the transaction-oriented, or shall we say long-term operational technology and services issues that we help clients navigate. And that's where you can create millions of dollars of impact in helping somebody run something better, or helping somebody change an entire model of how they do something, or prepare them for the future and hopefully prepare them in a way that saves them money. So there's a dollar impact, but it's not a short-term dollar impact. It's a long-term dollar impact.
Yeah.
And it's a profound dollar impact. And, those are the kinds of things that, we can't put press releases out, right? We can't disclose the details and the names, because when you do advisory work of that nature, it's not the kind of thing that you can put numbers on, just by the nature of the work. But we've given examples of how we have clients who are repeat clients and take us with them from one firm to the next that they go to, right? For that very reason. Or sustain a membership with us for ongoing information, but then based on that, know to come to us for a particular problem-solving scenario kind of thing. And so it for an analyst point of view, I was an analyst at Everest Group for quite some time. It makes for interesting work. And it makes for interesting conversations too, right? Because we never tell a client, I can't talk to you about this. That's so-and-so's department, not my department. I mean, sometimes you need to pull in the expertise of a colleague to get very specific, but we're also pretty well-rounded so that you can at least provide something of value to the conversation and then bring a colleague in to go to the next level, for example. And it's the same thing. We can talk services and technology, oftentimes, with the same analyst. So that was part of my goal in our conversation today, was to get folks familiar with us. I wanted to thank you, Shirley, and thank you, Amy, for your time and for your comments. Do you have any last minute wrap up things that you want to put out there before we thank our audience and give everybody some time in their calendar?
Thank you. This has been really fun. I have one comment to wrap up, because I often go to our own events, and a lot of our sponsors, like our provider side, come up to me and ask me how they can get in front of procurement and how they can sell more to procurement, which I understand why they're asking that. I always laugh, because I'm like, well, that's kind of my goal too. So, if it were easy, right? Procurement's a very selective customer, right? So you got to do good work. That's kind of it. There's no shortcut to selling. But I do encourage AR people and advisor relations people to really make sure that you're getting involved with Everest Group, that you're understanding what the peaks are, that you're participating, that you're getting us good buyer references. I love hearing indirectly, because I don't do the peak side, but hearing indirectly what buyers are saying, what interesting features providers have introduced, and sometimes they'll come and tell me that, and I'm like, okay, well, that's really interesting, because I can bring that to a client as an example, right? Having case studies, but when we write about a case study, we talk to the buyer directly and we name them. They're not just anonymous. That's, in one case, we just did a tech provider thought leadership paper for ProcureTech, and we interviewed 3 or 4 of their clients that are using agentic and talked about the ROI that they were getting off of it, and really validated that, right? I don't want to hear the marketing. I want to hear the actual real experience and be able to share that with our clients. And that's really where I think we can add a lot of value. We're adding value to the buy side, but we're also adding value to the AR team and to the provider side. So that's kind of my parting words, that engaging with people like Katrina and client directors to understand how to work with us actually does cycle through the system. And the holistic approach we have, it's really beneficial to us when we have provider clients that are leaning in.
Yeah, and just because I do work with the provider clients, and my teams do run the peak matrix assessments. Just want to double down on that. We don't charge for providers to engage with us. We find this to be a valuable use of our time. That's our job, right? Is to understand the marketplace that's out there, what capabilities and functionalities are out there. And so it's actually a somewhat cheap way. I say somewhat because your time is money. I get that. And to participate in our research does require an investment of time on your side. And we truly appreciate that. But that is the best way of getting in front of functional leaders, the procurement leaders that Amy was talking about, is to enter our data sets, to be part of our IP. And to Katrina's point, a lot of times our influence isn't directly, we can't say that we were involved, but the influence is somewhat there. So really value the partnership that we have with the AR community, and looking forward to answering any questions that you guys might have for any of us. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you, Shirley. That's a great way to wrap up. So keep in mind, folks, that my role is to facilitate your work with Everest Group, for you to help you understand who to work with, how to work with. I'm happy to have those conversations, whether you're an existing client or not. I talk to everybody, and I work with everybody, both on your side as well as on the Everest Group side. So feel free to reach out. Wanted to remind you to take advantage of that discounted rate for Everest Group Elevate. I'll be there. Shirley and Amy will be there. A lot of our colleagues on the research side will be there, and your AR colleagues will be there. We had a really nice time last year. We had a panel of our own that was specifically talking about AR topics. We had an AR networking event. So hope to see you all there, and have yourselves a good day, and hopefully be in touch soon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amy and Shirley.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Fun chatting with you too.